I watched Wyatt's car disappear down the street, the familiar ache in my chest growing stronger with each passing second. My boy, always working so hard for us. I hobbled back inside, my cane tapping a steady rhythm on the hardwood floor. Wyatt's gone then? Cora's voice drifted from the kitchen, cool and disinterested. Yes, he just left, I replied, making my way to join her. He said he'd call when he lands in Chicago. Cora sat at the table, scrolling through her phone. She barely glanced up as I entered. I'm sure he will. I lowered myself into a chair, wincing at the twinge in my hip. I thought we could have breakfast together, I suggested, trying to keep my tone light. I can whip up some pancakes. She finally looked at me, her expression unreadable. No need, Lenora. I have errands to run. I watched as she stood, gathering her purse and keys. But it's barely 8 o'clock. Surely you have time for a quick bite? Cora sighed, her frustration evident. I said I have errands. I don't need to explain myself to you. The door slammed behind her, leaving me alone in the suddenly too quiet house. I pushed myself up, determined to make those pancakes anyway. As I mixed the batter, my mind wandered to happier times, when this kitchen was filled with laughter and the smell of my late husband's famous blueberry muffins. The phone's shrill ring startled me out of my reverie. I answered, hoping to hear Wyatt's voice. Lenora, it's Margie. You won't believe what I just saw. My old friend's tone sent a chill down my spine. What is it, Margie? I was driving past that new cafe on Main Street, and I swear I saw Cora there with a man. They looked cozy. The bowl slipped from my grasp, clattering to the floor and splattering batter everywhere. What do you mean, cozy? Margie's voice lowered. Holding hands across the table, he kissed her cheek when they got up to leave. My heart raced as I gripped the counter for support. There must be some explanation. Maybe it was a relative or... Lenora, honey, I know what I saw, and the way he was looking at her. That was no relative. I sank to the floor, my legs no longer able to hold me up. What do I do, Margie? Should I tell Wyatt? Not yet, she advised. We need more proof. Can you check her phone or computer? The thought of snooping made me uncomfortable, but the image of Cora with another man burned in my mind. I'll see what I can find out. After hanging up, I slowly cleaned up the spilled batter, my thoughts in turmoil. How could Cora do this to Wyatt, to our family? Hours passed as I waited for her return, each minute stretching into an eternity. When I finally heard her key in the lock, I steeled myself for confrontation. Cora breezed in, shopping bags in hand. Oh, you're still up, she said, surprise evident in her voice. Where were you? I asked, hating how my voice shook. She raised an eyebrow. I told you, running errands. Why? I took a deep breath. Margie saw you at the cafe on Main Street, with a man. Cora's face hardened. So you're spying on me now? Having your friends follow me around? That's not what happened. She cut me off, her voice ice cold. I don't have to explain myself to you, Lenora. This is my house, and I'll come and go as I please. This is Wyatt's house, I countered, finding my strength. And mine. You're here because we welcomed you into our family. Cora laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. Family? Is that what you call this prison? Living under your constant scrutiny, never good enough for your precious son? She stormed upstairs, leaving me shaken and more certain than ever that something was terribly wrong. As I made my way to bed, one thought echoed in my mind. I had to protect Wyatt, no matter the cost. The next morning I woke with a sense of dread weighing heavily on my chest. Cora's words from the night before echoed in my mind as I slowly made my way downstairs. The house was eerily quiet. No sign of my daughter-in-law. I just settled at the kitchen table with a cup of tea when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Wyatt. Landed safely, Mom. Miss you already. Give Cora a hug for me. My heart clenched. If only he knew. The day dragged on, each hour filled with worry and suspicion. By late afternoon, I couldn't bear the silence any longer. I needed to get out to clear my head. My physical therapy session wasn't until tomorrow, but a short walk might do me good. I grabbed my cane and headed for the front door, only to find it wouldn't budge. Frowning, I tried again, pushing harder this time. That's when I noticed the chain lock was engaged from the inside. Cora? I called out, my voice trembling. Are you there? The door's locked. Silence. I knocked louder, panic rising in my throat. Cora, please let me in. Finally, I heard footsteps approaching. The door opened a crack, Cora's face appearing in the narrow gap. Her eyes were cold. her lips pressed into a thin line. "What are you doing out there?" she asked, her tone dripping with disdain. "I went for a walk," I explained, trying to keep my voice steady. "Why is the chain on? I live here too, you know." Cora's laugh was harsh and bitter. "Do you? Sometimes I wonder. This is supposed to be my home, Lenora, my sanctuary, but with you here it feels like a prison." I recoiled as if she'd slapped me. "Cora, please, let's talk about this. We're family." "Family," she spat. "You're not my family. You're just a burden Wyatt refuses to let go of." With that, she slammed the door in my face. I stood there, stunned, my hand still raised to knock. Tears welled up in my eyes as the reality of the situation hit me. I was locked out of my own home, rejected by the woman my son loved. My legs trembled, threatening to give out. I needed help. Fumbling with my phone, I called the only person I could think of. "Margie, it's Lenora. I need you." 20 minutes later, Margie's beat-up station wagon pulled into the driveway. She hurried over to me, her face etched with concern. "Oh, honey," she said, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "What happened?" Through tears, I recounted the events of the past 2 days. Cora's mysterious outing, our argument, and now this cruel lockout. Margie listened, her expression growing darker with each word. "That little witch," she muttered. "Come on, let's get you out of here. You can stay with me tonight." As we drove away, I caught a glimpse of Cora watching from an upstairs window. The look on her face sent a chill down my spine. At Margie's cozy bungalow, I sank into her overstuffed couch, feeling utterly drained. My friend bustled about, making tea and muttering under her breath about ungrateful daughters-in-law. "What am I going to do, Margie?" I asked, my voice small and defeated. "I can't go back there, not after this." Margie sat beside me, taking my hand in hers. "We're going to fight, that's what. Cora can't treat you like this. It's time Wyatt knew the truth about his wife." I shook my head, fear gripping my heart. But what if he doesn't believe me? What if I lose him too? "Lenora, look at me," Margie said firmly. "Your son loves you. He deserves to know what's happening in his own home. We'll gather evidence, make sure he sees Cora for who she really is." As I nodded, a new determination sparked within me. Cora might have won this battle, but I wasn't about to let her destroy my family. Whatever it took, I would protect Wyatt and reclaim my place in our home. Little did I know, the war was just beginning. I woke up on Margie's couch, disoriented and stiff. For a moment, I forgot why I was there. Then it all came rushing back. Cora's betrayal, the locked door, the cruel words. My heart sank as I realized this wasn't just a bad dream. Margie bustled into the living room, a steaming mug of coffee in each hand. "How are you holding up, honey?" she asked, handing me a cup. I took a sip, grateful for the warmth. "I've been better," I admitted. "I just can't believe this is happening." Margie sat beside me, her face set with determination. "We need to tell Wyatt what's going on. He deserves to know the truth about Cora." The thought of breaking my son's heart made me nauseous. But what if he doesn't believe me? What if I lose him too? "Lenora," Margie said firmly, "your son loves you. He needs to know what's happening in his own home. We'll gather evidence, make sure he sees Cora for who she really is." I nodded, a plan forming in my mind. "You're right. I can't let her get away with this." We spent the morning strategizing. Margie suggested we drive by the house to see if Cora was up to anything suspicious. As we pulled onto my street, my heart raced. There, in the driveway, was a sleek sports car I didn't recognize. "That's him," I whispered, my hands shaking. "That's the man Cora was with at the cafe." Margie's eyes narrowed. "Got you now, you little home wrecker," she muttered, pulling out her phone to snap a few pictures. We watched as Cora emerged from the house, laughing and hanging on the mystery man's arm. The sight of her so carefree while my world was crumbling made my blood boil. "I need to call Wyatt," I said, my voice trembling. "He needs to know." Back at Margie's, I paced the living room, phone in hand. Finally, I gathered my courage and dialed. "Mom?" Wyatt's voice was warm, concerned. "Is everything okay? You never call during my trips." I took a deep breath. "Wyatt, honey, there's something I need to tell you. It's about Cora." "What about her? Is she all right?" The worry in his voice nearly broke me. "She's fine, but, Wyatt, she's been seeing someone else. I saw her with him today at our house." Silence. Then, "What are you talking about, Mom? That's impossible. Cora would never—" "I'm so sorry, sweetheart," I interrupted, my voice cracking. "But it's true. Margie saw them together at a cafe, and today we saw his car in the driveway. I have pictures. I heard Wyatt's sharp intake of breath. No, he whispered. No, there has to be some mistake. I wish there was, I said softly. But Wyatt, there's more. Cora locked me out of the house yesterday. She said I was a burden, that living with me was unbearable. The line went quiet for so long I thought we'd been disconnected. Then Wyatt's voice came back, hard and cold. I'm coming home. Now, don't confront her, Mom. Just stay with Margie. I'll be there as soon as I can. After we hung up, I collapsed onto the couch, emotionally drained. Margie sat beside me, rubbing my back soothingly. You did the right thing, she assured me. Wyatt needed to know. I nodded, but guilt gnawed at me. Had I just destroyed my son's marriage? What if I was wrong about everything? As if reading my thoughts, Margie squeezed my hand. Don't you dare start doubting yourself, Lenora. We both know what we saw. Cora made her bed. Now she has to lie in it. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text from Cora. Where are you? Come home now. We need to talk. I showed Margie the message, my hands shaking. What do I do? Margie's eyes flashed with anger. You stay right here. That woman doesn't get to order you around anymore. Let her stew until Wyatt gets home. As I settled in for an agonizing wait, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the calm before the storm. Whatever happened next, nothing would ever be the same again. The early morning sun barely peeked through the curtains as I sat in my living room, my heart pounding. Wyatt had arrived late last night, his face a mask of pain and anger. Now we waited for Cora to return from wherever she'd spent the night. Margie sat beside me, her presence a comforting anchor in the storm that was about to break. Are you sure you want to do this, Mom? Wyatt asked, his voice hoarse from lack of sleep. I reached out and squeezed his hand. We have to, honey. Cora needs to face what she's done. The sound of a key in the lock made us all freeze. Cora walked in, her eyes widening as she took in the scene before her. Wyatt? What are you doing home? My son stood, his shoulders tense. I think you know why I'm here, Cora. She glanced at me, her expression hardening. What lies has she been telling you? They're not lies, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. We saw you with him, Cora, at the cafe and here at the house. Cora's face paled, but she quickly recovered. So you've been spying on me? That's rich, coming from you, Lenora. Wyatt stepped between us. Don't you dare try to turn this around on my mother. I saw the pictures. Cora, I know everything. Just then, a car pulled into the driveway. Through the window, I saw a man get out, the same one from the cafe. My breath caught in my throat as he approached the front door. Who's that? Wyatt demanded, his voice dangerously low. Cora's eyes darted between Wyatt and the door. It's not what you think. The doorbell rang, shattering the tense silence. Wyatt strode to the door and yanked it open. Who the hell are you? The man looked startled. I'm here to see Cora. Is she home? Oh, she's home all right, Wyatt growled, grabbing the man's collar and dragging him inside. Now, both of you are going to explain what's going on. Cora's face crumpled. Wyatt, please, I can explain. Then start talking, he snapped. What followed was a painful confession. Cora admitted to the affair, tears streaming down her face as she detailed her unhappiness in the marriage. She claimed Wyatt was never home, always working, and that living with me was suffocating her. You're never here, Cora cried. Living with your mother is unbearable. I felt so alone, so trapped. Wyatt's face was a storm of emotions. So instead of talking to me, you decided to cheat? To treat my mother like garbage? The other man, who introduced himself as David, looked uncomfortable. Look, I didn't know she was married. Cora told me she was divorced. I watched as my son's world crumbled around him. The pain in his eyes was almost unbearable. I want you both out of my house, Wyatt said, his voice eerily calm. Now. Cora reached for him. Wyatt, please, we can work this out. He jerked away from her touch. There's nothing to work out. We're done, Cora. I want a separation. As Cora and David left, the house fell into a heavy silence. Wyatt collapsed onto the couch, his head in his hands. I moved to comfort him, but he stood abruptly. I need some air, he muttered, heading for the door. Wyatt, wait, I called, but he was already gone. Margie put her arm around me. Give him time, Lenora. He's been through a lot. I nodded, fighting back tears. We'd won in a way. The truth was out, Cora's betrayal exposed, but looking at the wreckage of my son's marriage, I couldn't help but wonder, at what cost? As I sat there, surrounded by the remnants of our shattered family, I knew one thing for certain: the real battle was just beginning. Somehow, I had to find a way to help Wyatt heal, to rebuild our lives from the ashes of Cora's betrayal. And deep down, a part of me whispered that this wasn't over. Cora wouldn't go down without a fight, and I had to be ready for whatever came next. The days following Cora's departure were a blur of pain and confusion. Wyatt moved through the house like a ghost, barely speaking, his eyes hollow. I ached to comfort him, but every attempt seemed to push him further away. One morning, I found him sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a stack of papers. "Wyatt?" I asked gently. "What are those?" He looked up, his face a mask of anguish. "Divorce papers. Cora's lawyer sent them over." My heart sank. Despite everything, a small part of me had hoped they might reconcile. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry." Wyatt's laugh was bitter. "Don't be. You were right about her all along." I reached out to touch his hand, but he pulled away. "I need some air," he muttered, heading for the door. As it slammed behind him, I felt a surge of determination. I couldn't let Cora destroy my son like this. I needed proof, irrefutable evidence of her betrayal. I called Margie, and together we hatched a plan. We'd go to the cafe where Cora and David often met, hoping to catch them in the act. The next afternoon found us huddled in a corner booth, nervously sipping coffee. "Are you sure about this, Lenora?" Margie whispered. Before I could answer, the bell above the door chimed. My breath caught as Cora walked in, followed closely by David. They settled at a table across the room, oblivious to our presence. Margie squeezed my hand. "Now's our chance," she said, pulling out her phone. We watched in stunned silence as Cora leaned in, kissing David passionately. Margie's camera clicked furiously, capturing every damning moment. Suddenly, Cora's eyes met mine, her face contorted with rage as she stormed over to our table. "You miserable old hag," she hissed. "Can't you just leave me alone?" I stood, my legs shaking but my voice steady. "You're the one who needs to leave us alone, Cora. You've hurt Wyatt enough." She laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. "Hurt him? Please. I set him free. He was suffocating, tied to you in that house. You can't prove anything, Lenora. This is all your fault." Something in me snapped. Years of pent-up frustration and anger came pouring out. "My fault? You're the one who cheated, who lied, who treated my son like garbage, and now we have proof." I gestured to Margie's phone, and Cora's face paled. She lunged for it, but Margie was quicker, snatching it away. "It's over, Cora," I said firmly. "Go live your life, but leave my family alone." As Cora stormed out, David trailing behind her, I collapsed back into the booth, exhausted but triumphant. Back at home, I showed Wyatt the pictures. His face crumpled as he scrolled through them, each image a fresh wound. "I can't believe she'd do this," he whispered. I wrapped my arms around him, and this time he didn't pull away. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart, but now you know the truth." Wyatt nodded, wiping his eyes. "You're right. I need to end this for good." Together we packed up the last of Cora's belongings. As Wyatt carried the boxes to the porch, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. We were finally free of her toxicity. That night, as I lay in bed, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. My blood ran cold as I read Cora's words. "This isn't over, Lenora. You'll regret crossing me." I stared at the screen, my mind racing. Cora's threat hung in the air, a dark cloud over our fragile peace. I knew then that this battle was far from over. The question was, how far was I willing to go to protect my son and our family? As I drifted off to sleep, one thought crystallized in my mind. Whatever Cora had planned, I would be ready. This time I wouldn't let her catch us off guard. The war might not be over, but I was determined to win. Weeks passed, and slowly, life began to settle into a new rhythm. Wyatt threw himself into work, often coming home late, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. I tried to give him space, but my heart ached to see him so broken. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, Wyatt stumbled through the door, his tie askew and eyes red-rimmed. "Wyatt?" I asked, alarmed. "What's wrong?" He collapsed into a chair, his head in his hands. "I saw Cora today," he mumbled. She looked happy, Mom, with him." I felt a surge of anger. How dare she flaunt her new relationship when my son was still in pieces? But I pushed it down, focusing on Wyatt. "Oh, sweetheart," I said, wrapping my arms around him. "I'm so sorry." He leaned into me, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. In that moment, I made a decision. We couldn't keep living like this, trapped in the shadow of Cora's betrayal. The next morning I called Margie. "We need to do something," I told her. "Wyatt's falling apart, and I can't just stand by and watch." Margie agreed to come over, and soon we were brainstorming ways to help Wyatt move on. As we talked, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I might not be able to mend my son's broken heart, but I could damn well try to make his life easier. We decided to start small. Margie and I began inviting Wyatt to join us for dinners, game nights, anything to get him out of the house and his own head. At first, he resisted, but slowly I saw glimpses of my old Wyatt returning. One Saturday, as we worked together in the garden, something we hadn't done since before his marriage, Wyatt turned to me with a small smile. "Thanks, Mom," he said softly, "for everything." I felt my heart swell with love and pride. We were going to be okay. But just as things were looking up, disaster struck. I was in the kitchen when I heard a crash from the living room. I rushed in to find Wyatt on the floor, clutching his ankle, his face contorted in pain. "What happened?" I cried, kneeling beside him. "Tripped," he gasped. "I think it's broken." The next few hours were a blur of ambulances and emergency rooms. As we waited for the doctor, my phone buzzed with a text. It was Cora. "Heard about Wyatt. Guess you can't take care of him after all. Maybe he needs his wife back." I stared at the screen, my blood boiling. How dare she? And how did she even know? Before I could respond, the doctor arrived with the verdict. Wyatt's ankle was indeed broken. He'd need surgery and weeks of recovery. As we drove home, Wyatt silent and brooding in the passenger seat, I felt a wave of panic. How was I going to manage this? My own mobility was still limited from the stroke. How could I care for Wyatt and keep up with the house? That night, as Wyatt slept fitfully upstairs, I sat at the kitchen table, feeling more overwhelmed than I had in years. Cora's text haunted me. Was she right? Was I not enough for Wyatt? Just then, my phone lit up with another message. It was Margie. "Heard about Wyatt. I'm coming over first thing tomorrow. We'll figure this out together." I felt tears prick my eyes, but this time they were tears of relief and gratitude. We weren't alone in this. As I climbed the stairs to check on Wyatt, I steeled myself for the challenges ahead. Cora might think she'd won, that she could swoop in and reclaim her place in Wyatt's life, but she was wrong. We'd weathered storms before, Wyatt and I, and we'd weather this one too, together. But as I drifted off to sleep, a nagging worry gnawed at the edges of my mind. What if Cora was right? What if I wasn't enough? The coming days would test us all, and I prayed I had the strength to see us through. The weeks following Wyatt's accident were a blur of doctor's appointments, physical therapy sessions, and sleepless nights. I pushed myself to the limit, determined to prove Cora wrong. I could take care of my son. I had to. One morning, as I struggled to help Wyatt down the stairs, my own legs trembling with the effort, I caught a glimpse of our reflection in the hallway mirror. We looked exhausted, defeated. For a moment, doubt crept in. Was I really helping, or just making things worse? "Mom," Wyatt said softly, "maybe we should hire some help." I shook my head, forcing a smile. "We're managing just fine, honey. I've got this." But the truth was, I didn't have it. Not even close. That afternoon, I had my own physical therapy appointment. As I worked through my exercises, my therapist, Sarah, noticed my distraction. "Lenora," she said gently, "you're pushing yourself too hard. Your progress has been amazing, but if you don't take care of yourself, you'll end up back where you started." I felt tears prick my eyes. "I don't have a choice," I whispered. "Wyatt needs me." Sarah squeezed my hand. "You can't pour from an empty cup, Lenora. It's okay to ask for help." As I left the clinic, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Heard Wyatt's not doing so well. Maybe he needs his wife back. I can take better care of him than you ever could." My blood ran cold. Cora... I was so distracted by the message that I didn't notice the car speeding through the parking lot. I froze, my cane slipping on the wet pavement. Suddenly, a hand grabbed my arm, yanking me back just as the car whizzed by. "Mrs. Henderson, are you all right?" I looked up to see David, Cora's former lover, of all people. He steadied me, concern etched on his face. "I'm fine," I stammered, pulling away. "What are you doing here?" He looked sheepish. I've been meaning to talk to you about Cora." My heart raced. "What about her?" "She's been acting strange lately, talking about getting Wyatt back, no matter what it takes. I think she might do something drastic." Before I could respond, my phone rang. It was Margie, her voice frantic. Lenora, you need to get home now. Cora's here and she's demanding to see Wyatt. Panic surged through me. Don't let her in. I'm on my way. I turned to David. I need a ride. Now. The drive home was agonizing. Every red light felt like an eternity. When we finally pulled up, I saw Cora's car in the driveway, Margie standing on the porch, blocking the door. I rushed out, my legs shaky but fueled by adrenaline. Cora, I shouted. Get away from my house. She whirled around, her eyes wild. You can't keep me from him, Lenora. Wyatt needs me. He doesn't need you, I spat. He needs peace and healing, something you've never given him. Cora lunged forward, but David caught her arm. Enough, Cora. It's over. She wrenched away from him, tears streaming down her face. You don't understand. None of you do. I love him. If you loved him, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart, you would let him go. For a moment, Cora seemed to deflate. Then, without warning, she shoved past me, racing for the door. I stumbled, my cane clattering to the ground. Mom! Wyatt's voice came from inside. He appeared in the doorway, balancing on his crutches, his face a mask of shock and anger. As Cora reached for him, I found strength I didn't know I had. I pushed myself up, stepping between them. You can't break us, I said, my voice ringing with conviction. We're stronger without you. Wyatt's hand found mine, squeezing tight. We stood united, facing Cora together. In that moment, I knew we'd reached a turning point. Whatever happened next would define our future. And I was ready to fight for it with everything I had. 6 months had passed since that fateful confrontation with Cora. The leaves were turning golden, a crisp autumn breeze rustling through the trees as Margie and I strolled through the park. My cane was gone, replaced by a newfound strength and balance I'd worked hard to achieve. I can't believe how far you've come, Lenora, Margie said, beaming with pride. You're practically running circles around me now. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in years. I couldn't have done it without you, Margie. You've been my rock through all of this. As we rounded a corner, I spotted a familiar figure sitting on a bench ahead. My heart skipped a beat. It was Cora. She looked different, thinner, more subdued. When she saw us, her eyes widened with recognition. For a moment, I thought about turning away, avoiding the confrontation. But something in me had changed. I was no longer afraid. Hello, Cora, I said as we approached. She stood, wringing her hands nervously. Lenora, I've been hoping to run into you. Margie squeezed my arm supportively as Cora continued. I wanted to apologize, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. For everything. I was selfish and cruel, and I hurt you both so much. I took a deep breath, surprised by the calm that washed over me. Thank you for saying that, Cora. It means a lot to hear it. She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. How is Wyatt? He's doing well, I replied. He's found his footing again. We both have. Cora smiled sadly. I'm glad. You both deserve happiness. As we parted ways, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, the last remnants of anger and resentment finally fading away. Later that evening, Wyatt and I sat on the porch, watching the sunset. He'd just returned from a successful business trip, his confidence restored and his smile genuine once again. I saw Cora today, I said softly. Wyatt tensed for a moment, then relaxed. How was that? Surprisingly healing, I admitted. She apologized. I think she's finally found some peace. Wyatt nodded, a thoughtful expression on his face. You know, Mom, I've been thinking a lot about what happened, about how you stood by me through everything. I reached out, squeezing his hand. That's what family does, sweetheart. I know, he said, his voice thick with emotion. But it's more than that. You taught me what real strength looks like, what unconditional love really means. Tears welled in my eyes as Wyatt continued. I've decided to cut back on work, he said. I want to spend more time here with you. Maybe we could start having those Sunday dinners again, like when Dad was alive. My heart swelled with joy. I'd love that, Wyatt. As the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, I marveled at how far we'd come. The road had been rocky, filled with pain and betrayal, but we'd emerged stronger, our bond unbreakable. We've endured so much, I said, my voice filled with wonder, but we've emerged stronger. Wyatt smiled, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. That's because we had each other, Mom, and we always will. Just then, Margie's car pulled into the driveway. She waved cheerfully, a bag of takeout in her hand. Hope you two are hungry, she called out. I brought enough for an army. As we laughed and welcomed Margie onto the porch, I felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over me. We had weathered the storm, faced our demons, and come out the other side. Our family might look different now, but it was stronger than ever. Friendship and family, I realized, were our greatest strengths. They had carried us through the darkest times and would continue to light our way forward. As we settled in for an evening of good food and even better company, I knew that whatever challenges the future might hold, we would face them together. And that was all that mattered.